Me, they laughed when I brought out the roast chicken. That slow, simmering kind of laugh passed around like wine, starting with my daughter-in-law and finishing with my grandson, who hadn't touched his carrots. I'd spent the day preparing that meal, rubbed the skin with butter and lemon zest the way their father used to like. Roasted garlic in foil, mashed the potatoes by hand, whipped the cream myself for the pie. The laughter didn't start loud. Just a look, then a cough, then that awful pause that lets you know you've become the joke. I'm Edna Keller, 68, and that was the moment I knew I wasn't their mother anymore. Not in the way that mattered. Subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. I raised 3 boys in that house. It never stayed quiet for long. There was always something on the stove, beans bubbling, stew thickening, cornbread rising in the old pan I got from my mother. When their father left, I filled that silence with recipes. Feeding them was how I showed them I was still there, still holding us together, even when I wasn't sure I could. Christopher was. The youngest, always had a sweet tooth, always under my arm when I baked. He used to say, "Mom's hands taste like cinnamon." That stayed with me. For years, I believed he remembered that, believed he loved me for it. When he married Dana, I tried to make room. It's what you do. You shrink a little, step back, let the new woman build her place. But some people don't want room. They want the whole house. And Dana didn't like my food from the start. "Too heavy," she said once, in front of everyone. Too old-fashioned. I let it slide. I always let it slide. I started seeing the signs last Thanksgiving. Dana offered to host. I brought my pies anyway. Pumpkin with nutmeg, apple with brown sugar. She didn't touch them, said gluten made her bloat. Later, I saw my pies in the trash, untouched, still wrapped in foil. No one said a word, not even Christopher. He just looked down and poured more wine, but the worst came on a Sunday in March. I had cooked all afternoon. My knees were aching, and my hands were sore from kneading dough. I set the table, brought out the roast, the sides, the pie. And somewhere between the stuffing and the silence, I heard Dana say under her breath, "It tastes like nursing home food." And Christopher, he laughed. I didn't say a word. I cleared the plates. I washed the dishes. I folded the cloth napkins and put them away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the window until the sky lightened. Something inside me cracked, but it didn't bleed. It was clean, quiet. Final, the next morning, I drove to the courthouse, filed the papers, changed the deed. Made sure the stove was listed as a separate asset. It was old, not worth much, but it was mine. So was the house, technically. They didn't know that. I'd never added Christopher's name like he'd asked me to last year. Smiled and said, "We'll talk about it." We never did. I packed my things slowly, the things that mattered. My mother's recipe cards, the tin measuring cups, the picture of the boys with chocolate on their faces. I left the pictures of Dana. I didn't need her face watching me go. I called a moving company and gave them one instruction: take the stove last. I wanted to walk behind it like a pallbearer, like I was burying something that once kept us warm. The house was quiet when I left. I didn't say goodbye. I waited for them to notice. It didn't take long. The voicemail started first. "Mom, what is this? Where's the stove? Why is the house locked?" You can't just disappear. I didn't answer. I let them twist. Dana posted on Facebook about how I'd stolen her kitchen, said I was unwell, said elder abuse could go both ways. She didn't know I saw it. I have another account. I watched the comments pile up. I read every one. I didn't feel anger, just a kind of cool distance, like watching strangers fight through a glass wall. Christopher texted me 2 weeks later. Said he missed me. Said the new oven Dana bought didn't cook right. Said her lasagna came out dry. I didn't reply. I rented a small place near the coast. A little white cottage with blue shutters and an old fig tree in the yard. It smells like salt and rosemary. The kitchen is small, but I brought my stove. The movers thought I was mad. One of them laughed. I didn't explain. I don't explain myself anymore. The neighbor, Rita, brought me soup the second week. Lentil and ham. Still warm. I sat on the steps and ate it with a plastic spoon. When I was done, I cried. Not for what I'd lost, but for the taste of someone caring. It had been a long time. I spend my days gardening now. I read. I walk by the sea. I cook when I want to. Not to prove anything. Just to feed myself. Sometimes I leave a plate on Rita's porch. She never says much, but she always returns the dish clean. Last month, Christopher found me. I saw him through the window. He stood there holding a pie. Store-bought. Plastic lid. I opened the door and stood in it. He looked older. Tired. He said he was sorry. I nodded. He asked if we could talk. I said I was just sitting down to eat. He said he'd wait. I said, "You've already eaten without me." Then I closed the door. That night I lit a candle and wrote in my journal. I listed everything I remembered baking for them. Every birthday cake, every Sunday roast, every pie dot. Then I closed the book and slid it into the drawer next to the recipe. Cards. I poured myself a glass of wine, leaned against the stove, and I whispered, "This still tastes like home." It wasn't always like that. There was a time when they came running into the kitchen the second they smelled cinnamon or browned butter. I remember their feet thudding down the hallway, the clatter of boys too big to be chasing each other and too young to stop. The kitchen was my place, but I let them in. I let them dip their fingers in batter and lick the beaters. I let them steal bits of cookie dough even when I said not to. That was part of the dance. The saying no, the pretending to scold. The small joys we shared in that tiny, cute, crowded space. After their father left, I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up around 3, sometimes from a dream, sometimes just from the weight of things. I'd go to the kitchen, turn on the little lamp above the stove, and bake. Quietly, without fuss. I'd roll out dough while the world was asleep. I found comfort in the rhythm, measuring, mixing, kneading, waiting. It gave me something to hold on to. Christopher would wake sometimes and pad into the kitchen, blanket around his shoulders, eyes heavy. "Is there pie?" Always, I'd say. Or at least something sweet on its way. He'd sit at the table and I'd slice him the first piece. That became our ritual. He never told his brothers. It was ours alone. I thought those things lasted. I truly did. I thought memories like that became part of people. That no matter how they grew, how far they wandered, the good would stay rooted. But I see now how easily people rewrite their pasts. How even love can be replaced if it's not fashionable anymore. When Christopher met Dana, he brought her home for Christmas. I remember everything about that visit. She wore beige top to bottom. "Cashmere," she said. She shook my hand like she was visiting a bed and breakfast she might review online. I offered her cider. She asked if I had sparkling water. I said, "No, but I could make tea." She smiled like I'd offered her boiled socks. That was the first time I felt it, the space between us. Not just her and me, but Christopher too. Like she came with scissors and started trimming the parts of him that didn't fit her aesthetic. He still hugged me that weekend, still helped me dry the dishes. But he watched her first, like checking for cues. I saw it even if he didn't. Realized that careful glance, that seeking of silent permission. She had already taught him how to flinch before loving me. She didn't care for my cooking, that much was clear. Said she didn't eat gluten, dairy, red meat. Asked if I had any kombucha. I didn't even know what that was. Tupperware, a salad with chickpeas, and something pickled. Said it was gut-friendly. I kept quiet. I always kept quiet. Even when she picked at the turkey and asked if it was free range. Even when she made a face at the mashed potatoes and said, "These are dense." I didn't want to embarrass Christopher. I told myself she'd soften, that it was nerves. But women like Dana don't soften. They polish until everything around them is cold and gleaming. Over time, the holidays changed, became more about their preferences, their plans. I started getting invited later and only when it was convenient. Once they told me Christmas was being postponed because Dana's family had a ski trip. Postponed Christmas. Like it was a dentist appointment. They didn't want to come to my house anymore. Said it was too far, too cramped. The driveway had bad drainage and the guest room didn't have a firm enough mattress. Always something. So I went to theirs, carried my dishes in foil, rode buses in the rain, wore nice shoes that hurt just. So I wouldn't embarrass them. Told myself I was lucky to still be included. But each time I went, something of me was left behind. A pie left untouched. A recipe card dismissed. A story I told that no one listened to. Little by little, they stopped seeing me as someone who'd built a home and started seeing me as someone who overstayed her welcome in theirs. One night, after Thanksgiving, I offered to help with dishes. Dana smiled and said, "Oh no, Edna, just relax. You're our guest now." Guest. That word knocked something loose inside me. I'd spent 3 decades in kitchens making sure no one felt like a guest. And there I was, the woman who'd taught her son how to stir sauce without burning it, being dismissed. Like someone who wandered in from the street. I walked home that night instead of waiting for a ride. It was cold and my coat was too thin. I passed houses with warm windows and smells of leftovers and second helpings. And I thought, this is what happens to women like me. We cook, we care, we carry. Then we're quietly replaced by women with firmer ideas and better lighting. But I wasn't ready to be replaced. Not yet. I started making copies of documents, birth certificates, the house deed, bank statements. Just in case, I told myself. Just in case they ever tried to make decisions. Without me, it wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because I saw what was coming. Not a fight, not a scream, but a slow forgetting. A quiet boarding up of the room where I used to matter. And I wasn't going to sit inside and freeze. Not for anyone. I don't know what made me open the drawer in Christopher's hallway that day. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was habit. I'd gone over to drop off a casserole. Kana had just had a procedure, something elective, and Christopher had called, asking if I could bring something soft, something easy. So I did. I didn't ask questions, I baked. I wrapped it in a towel to keep it warm. I let myself in with the spare key they said was just for emergencies. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Like everyone had stepped out just moments before. I left the dish on the counter. The kitchen smelled like lemon and floor cleaner. The whole place always smelled like that, polished, perfect, unlived. There were no magnets on the fridge, no crumbs under the table, just white countertops in silence. I should have left right then. My feet didn't move. I opened the drawer because I was looking for something, a notepad maybe, a pen to leave a note, something polite, something to say I came and went and loved them enough not to disturb them. Inside the drawer were papers, a folder neatly labeled. I don't know why I opened it, but I did. The first page had my name on it, my full name, in crisp black ink, printed across the top of a document I hadn't signed. A petition dated 2 weeks earlier. Power of attorney transfer, attached to a draft of a letter from a lawyer whose name I didn't recognize. Said things like incapacity, cognitive concern, early planning for guardianship. I kept reading, but the words blurred. The only thing I remember clearly is Dana's handwriting on a yellow sticky note, stuck to the top corner. Let's file this by spring, before anything gets harder. I stood there for I don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. I felt the weight of the casserole still warm behind me, like I had brought them comfort while they plotted to take my choices away. I didn't cry, not then, not in their house. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Closed the drawer softly, smoothed the towel around the dish. Didn't touch. Anything else, didn't open another drawer. I didn't want to know what else they'd planned. On the way out, I stopped by the hall mirror. I looked at my own reflection like I was searching for proof. Did I look confused? Did I look like someone who needed watching? I looked like a woman who had given too much thought in the car. I sat with my hands on the wheel, not moving. The street was quiet. The tree in their yard rustled like it knew a secret. I thought of all the little things that had led to this. The nudges, the patronizing tones, the way Dana would talk to me slowly like I was 5 steps behind. The way Christopher stopped, asking for my advice, how he'd explain things I already knew. I thought it was just pride, generational difference. I thought they didn't understand how to talk to someone like me. I didn't think they'd try to take the rest of my life away. That night I went home and opened my own drawer, pulled out my files, bank records, deed documents, copies of everything I'd saved and safeguarded since I became the sole name on the house. I laid them out on the table like armor dot, and then I sat there in the quiet, and I said it out loud for the first time. They want to take me before I'm gone. I whispered it. It's like a secret too heavy to carry in silence any longer. I spent the next week watching them. Not directly. I didn't call. I didn't show up. I just listened. Checked their posts, their comments, their digital trails. Dana's blog mentioned caregiving, transitioning roles, preparing for elder decline. Christopher had shared it, saying proud of Dana for tackling hard topics. Hard topics, like my life, like my mind, like how to remove me from my own decisions without my permission. I made an appointment with a lawyer. She was young, smart. She didn't talk down to me. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. I handed her the documents and told her exactly what I wanted to do. I rewrote my will. I made a living trust. I assigned a different power of attorney, a friend from church, someone with no stake in my stove or my house or my garden. Just someone who knew I still woke up every morning and chose my own life. The lawyer looked over the papers, nodded, and said softly, "You're not the first." That stayed with me. You're not the first. I walked out of that office into the afternoon sun and felt something loosen in my chest. Like a knot untying. Like I'd been holding my breath since Dana moved in. They saw my love as weakness. They mistook my quiet for confusion. They believed my age meant I was already gone, but I wasn't. Not yet. I bought a notebook that day. One. With a hardcover and thick pages. Started writing things down. Not recipes, not lists, just moments. Things I wanted to remember. Things I didn't want anyone else to revise. The smell of roasted garlic. The sound of Christopher's laugh before she taught him how to hide it. The weight of pie crust in my hands. The time I danced in the kitchen with all 3 boys clinging. 2, my legs. The night I woke up crying and baked a chocolate cake just to feel like I could still make something sweet out of nothing. They can't take those things from me, even if they try. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not the lawyer, not the woman at the bank. Not the neighbor who waved at me every morning while dragging her trash bin up the driveway. I kept it folded inside like an old recipe in my apron pocket. Something that still smelled faintly of grief, but was mine now. Mine to carry. Mine to decide what to do with. I've started small. I made copies of everything I'd signed, owned, stored. I labeled them carefully. Legal, medical, financial. Wrote it all out in my own hand. Left instructions in case of an emergency. But made sure my emergency wouldn't be theirs to control. Then I bought a fireproof box. Heavy, solid, with a lock they didn't know. I tucked it into the hall closet beneath the extra linens, next to the quilts my mother stitched back when stitching meant survival. I ran my hand over the lid before closing the door. Quiet kind of goodbye to the woman who used to trust too easily. That week, I stopped answering their calls. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I let the phone ring, let it buzz on the counter while I stood by the window, watching the clouds move like slow boats across the sky. I thought about how many times I'd picked up just to say yes, just to make things easier, how many birthdays I'd rearranged, how many errands I'd run because they were too busy, too tired. To something no more. Dana left a voicemail on Wednesday, just checking in. Edna, hope you're okay. Let us know if you need anything. It didn't say we love you. It didn't say we miss you. It said, let us know. Like they were waiting for a gap in the armor. There wouldn't be one. By Friday. I had cleared out the drawer with all the old photographs. Not to throw them away, but to decide what I wanted to keep. I held each one for a moment before filing it. Me holding Christopher. On his first day of school, Christmas morning with flour on my cheek. A birthday cake so lopsided we all laughed. Back when laughter didn't come with a price. I saved those. The rest, Dana's posed smile. The pictures where I'd been cropped or half blurred in the background, I returned to an empty shoebox. Not out of spite, just separation. Sometimes you have to sort through your life like that. Decide what still holds warmth and what's just been sitting there taking up space. I didn't leave right away. I wanted to. There were mornings I'd packed and unpacked the same bag 3 times. Toothbrush, deed copy, letters from my sister, a jar of cinnamon sticks. But something kept me there just a little longer. Not for them, but for me. I needed to leave, right? Not as someone who ran, as someone who chose. So I waited for the moment. I didn't know what it would be. I thought maybe I'd wake up one morning and feel it in my chest. That click, that yes. But that wasn't how it came. It came in a knock. A city worker, polite, nervous, said there'd been a petition filed for a wellness check, that a family member expressed concern. He looked at me like he expected to find something broken. I stood in the doorway with a pie cooling on the counter behind me and asked if he'd like a slice. He blinked, said no, thank you, said I seemed more than well, said he'd note that. I thanked him, closed the door, locked it, and that was the moment. I called the moving company the next morning, told them I needed a truck by Saturday, gave them a list of items to load. Not much, a few boxes, some kitchen tools, my rocking chair, and the stove. Yes, the stove, I repeated. It's coming with me. They asked if it was gas or electric. Said it was memory. Said that would be enough. I wrote a note, not to them, to the house, to the woman I'd been inside it. I told her thank you for holding on when no one saw her, for keeping the light on even when the bulbs flickered, for feeding others long after she herself had gone hungry. Then I folded the note and tucked it behind the drawer in the kitchen, the one where the matches were kept. My own little artifact left where the next woman might find it and feel less alone. The last thing I packed was the pie plate. The old one with the crack down the center and the faded blue flowers. I wrapped it in a dish towel and placed it in. The front seat beside me. The house didn't cry when I left. It just stood there, still and soft and silent. It had watched enough departures to know this one mattered. I didn't tell Christopher I was going. I didn't tell anyone. No fight, no spectacle. Just a woman, a stove, and the knowledge that she was finally walking toward herself. The motel wasn't much, but it was clean. That was all I needed. Room 6, ground floor, parking lot view. Flickering porch light. A rust-stained sink and curtains that smelled faintly of lemon and thyme. The kind of place people passed through. But I didn't mind. It wasn't forever. It was a pause, a soft landing, a place between the woman I had been and the one I was becoming. The movers had already left. They brought the stove last, just like I asked. It looked strange there, set against the motel's cinder block wall, unplugged, cold, waiting. Of the men scratched his head, asked where I wanted it, pointed to the corner near the window. I'll be cooking again soon, said. He didn't respond, just nodded like he was used to stranger things. I tipped him well. That night I sat on the bed, feet bare, papers spread around me. Everything I owned now fit into 2 suitcases and a banker's box of folders. Legal documents, account closures, final statements. I'd transferred the utilities, closed the old checking account, redirected my mail. Each task was small, but together they felt like a severing. Every signature another thread cut. I worked slowly, deliberately. I wasn't in a hurry. I'd waited long enough to make these decisions on my own. Now I would take my time living them. The motel had a microwave but no stove. That didn't matter. I wasn't ready to cook again anyway. Not yet. For now I ate quietly. Yogurt, toast, slices of apple with peanut butter. I didn't miss the elaborate meals. I missed the purpose behind them. The way food used to connect me to people who cared, or at least pretended to. The stove sat unplugged in the corner like a monument. I ran my hand over its top some mornings, not to cook, just to remember. The handle still bore a dent, where Christopher once dropped a ladle as a boy. I left it there on purpose, to remind me there had been joy once. I called a friend from church, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe longer. She picked up on the second ring, asked if I was okay. I told her I was, somewhere in between. She offered her guest room, but I said no. I needed the space to be mine, even if it was only 12 feet by 10. She understood. We talked for an hour. She didn't ask what happened, just said she was glad I'd left before they took something that couldn't be given back. I let her words settle. Before they took something that couldn't be given back. I made a list the next morning, titled it What's Still Mine. It wasn't long. My name, my stove, my hands, the taste of cinnamon, my quiet, my choice. That was enough to start with. I went to the bank that day and updated my records. The clerk was younger than Christopher. She wore purple nail polish and called me ma'am. I signed my new address, tucked the receipt into my folder, and felt something loosen in my chest. When I got back to the room, there were 3 voicemails from Christopher. One said he was worried. Another said Dana had cried. The last one said, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't answer. It wasn't a game. It wasn't revenge. It was a line. I had spent so many years living in a house where my silence was mistaken for compliance. They believed they could decide for me because I hadn't spoken up. But I was never confused. I just didn't want to waste breath explaining why my love came in the form of biscuits and second servings. Now, I wasn't explaining anything. A few days later, I rented a small storage unit. I moved most of my things there: framed pictures, my grandmother's mixing bowl, a box of cards from birthdays past. Things I didn't want to drag from motel to motel, but couldn't let go of either. I placed the stove in the back, covered it with a sheet, gently, like tucking in a child. I stood in the doorway for a while before locking up. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. The next morning, I signed a 6-month lease on a 1-bedroom cottage 2 towns over, near the water. Nothing fancy, just a small front porch, a patch of overgrown roses, and a kitchen with enough space to breathe. The landlord didn't ask many questions. He saw my name, took my deposit, handed me the key. That was all. No judgment. No worry. Just a transaction between 2 adults. Like that, I drove straight to the storage unit, opened the door, ran my hand along the edge of the stove. I smiled. "Let's go home," I whispered. Back at the cottage, I watched the movers roll it into place. The room changed once it was in, felt fuller, warmer. Even though it hadn't been turned on in weeks, it held a kind of heat, the kind that came from years of being needed. I didn't plug it in right away. I just stood there with my palm on the metal, breathing. I was home now. Not the home I built for them. The home I chose for myself. The first sign that they had noticed I was really gone came in the form of a group email. Subject line, concerned. About Mom? No greeting, no warmth. Just Dana's voice, formal and tight. Like she was writing a press release. She CC'd Christopher, his brothers, and me. Wrote that she was deeply alarmed by my behavior. Said I had made impulsive, legally questionable decisions. Said she worried I was being influenced. Influenced by who? She didn't say. Just floated the idea like a balloon and waited to see who would catch the string. I read it 3 times, then closed the laptop. I didn't answer. 2 days later, Christopher called. Left a voicemail, said he missed me. Said he didn't understand why I'd gone so suddenly. As if it had happened overnight. As if decades of slow erasure could be ignored with the word suddenly. I played the message once, then deleted it. Dana posted a photo online. Her standing in the kitchen, a new stove behind her. Caption said, "Finally upgraded." The old one was long overdue. I stared at her smile, polished, practiced, and felt nothing. Just a cold recognition, like reading the last page of a book. I'd outgrown. Comments poured in. Love it. Looks so modern. Goodbye, Grandma vibes. I didn't comment, but I read every word. I saw what she was doing, rewriting the story, pretending I hadn't left but been replaced. Quietly edited out, as if I were nothing but a dated fixture. Something that no longer fit her version of the house. Christopher messaged me again. Time longer. He said things hadn't been perfect. That Dana had just been trying to help. That they'd only looked into the paperwork just in case. He called it future planning. I sat on my porch while the message played, the wind catching in. The rose bushes that curled around the gate, thorns were blooming. Not loudly, just enough to remind the world they weren't just decoration. He ended the message by asking if we could meet. I didn't reply. Instead, went inside and baked something for the first time in weeks. Blueberry muffins. I didn't follow a recipe. I just used what I remembered. A little too much vanilla. The batter a little thicker than it should have been. I didn't care. It wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. When they came out of the oven, I sat on the floor with one in each hand and ate slowly, the heat warming my fingers. I thought about how many times I'd baked for people who never said thank you. People who assumed the warm bread would just keep arriving. Who thought of love as a service, not a gift. Later that week, Christopher's brother Mark called. I hadn't heard from him in over a year. He asked how I was. I said I was fine. There was a pause. Then he said, "You scared them, you know." I let that settle. Good. I said, he tried to laugh. Tried to turn it into a joke. Said Dana was having a meltdown because she couldn't figure out how to access the accounts. I said that's no longer her concern. He was quiet then. Think he understood more than he let on. Kata, or maybe he'd seen this kind of unraveling before. In families where the glue leaves, they'd gotten used to me being easy. Now they were just off balance. Dana tried a softer approach next. A letter, handwritten, carefully worded. She called it a misunderstanding, said she'd been worried about liabilities, said they were only trying to protect the family. She included a picture, me and Christopher in the old backyard. One of those faded summer afternoons when he still let me hold his hand in public. She wrote, "I know how much you mean to him. Please don't walk away from that. I folded the letter, slid it under a book. I didn't burn it. I didn't frame it. I just let it sit. Like an old spice jar you no longer open. The scent faded. The purpose expired. Sarah came by the next morning with a jar of homemade fig jam. She didn't ask questions, just sat beside me on the porch, handed me the jar, and said, "You look like someone who finally exhaled." I smiled. It was the truest thing anyone had said to me in months. Later that afternoon, I went back to my notebook. It's the one I'd started. In the motel, I flipped to a clean page. Wrote, "They think I disappeared." I didn't. I just stopped being useful to people who never saw me clearly. It felt good to see the words in ink, see them hold their shape. It's like truth finally taking root. The calls slowed after that. The messages turned passive, polite, uncertain. Dana wrote once more, this time shorter. "If you need anything, we're here." She didn't say, "We love you." She didn't say, "We're sorry." It's just another performance of generosity. I didn't answer. I didn't need anything from them. I'd taken back the only thing that mattered. Myself. The cottage came with creaky floors and a back door that stuck when it rained, but it felt more like home than the house I left behind. I didn't need much. Just a place to sit with a morning light and drink my coffee without watching my words. I rearranged the furniture 3 times before it felt right. I put the stove by the window, not because it needed light, but because I liked the way the sun caught the metal in the afternoon. I bought a new tea kettle, yellow and cheerful, and set it beside the burners like a promise. I started cooking again. Not the big meals, not yet. Just small things. Toasted bread with rosemary and sea salt. Soft scrambled eggs. Muffins with berries from the market. I cooked like I was feeding something inside myself that had been starving quietly for years. And, for the first time, the food stayed mine. No critiques, no commentary, no one pushing it aside or mocking it with a smirk. I'd sit at the little kitchen table, just me and the plate, and take my time. Every bite felt like a decision to stay, to heal, to remain rooted in my own skin. There was a neighbor 2 doors down, K-Paul, maybe 10 or 11, thin with knees that seemed to grow faster than the rest of him. He passed by on a rusty bike every morning and waved. I always waved back. One day, he stopped. "You, the new lady?" I smiled. "I guess I am." He looked past me, eyes catching on the stove through the open door. "That's old," he said. "Cool, though," I said. "She's been with me a long time." He didn't ask why I called the stove she, just nodded like it made perfect sense. Then he pedaled off, leaving a dust trail behind him. That night I baked a banana loaf. I left 2 slices wrapped in foil on his porch the next morning. No note. Just a quiet offering. The next day, a knock. Mother. Nervous smile, soft voice. Said thank you. Said it's been a while since someone did something like that. I told her it felt good to make something again. We talked a little. Not much. Just enough. Her name was Lena. She worked nights, was raising the boy mostly alone. Said she didn't have much time to cook. I said I didn't have many people left to feed. The words came out without sting. Just truth. That was how it began. Not with fanfare. Not with declarations. Just a few shared muffins, a wave at dusk, a hello that held. Some evenings, she'd stop by with a bag of groceries she didn't need, extra apples, canned beans, lemons. Other times I'd leave a dish on her porch, soup, scones, something. Warm. It was the first time in years I felt a connection without condition. Nothing expected, nothing transactional. Just 2 women recognizing the small ways we keep each other going. I started going to the market again, really going. Talking. To the vendors, asking about peaches, smelling tomatoes. There was a man there, older than me, who sold honey and wore suspenders. He gave me an extra jar for free one day, said it looked like I needed something sweet. He didn't know the half of it. I still didn't talk to Christopher. Not even when he sent flowers. The card read, "Still love you. Always will." It didn't include an apology. It's just that soft, guilty kind of nostalgia men send when they miss your comfort, not your presence. I let the flowers wilt on the porch. Didn't throw them away. Let nature do the forgetting for me. Some nights I sat on the porch with my tea and thought about the woman I used to be. The one who answered every call. Who stayed too long at tables where no one passed her the salt. I thought of her and felt something like compassion. She tried. She really did. But now I had quiet. Not silence that heavy. Punished kind. No. This was soft, quiet, earned, chosen. A stillness I'd grown into. Rita, my friend from church, wrote to me. Sent a postcard with a watercolor of wildflowers on the front. Said she missed her. Walks asked if I'd found what I needed. I wrote back, I found something better. I found what I didn't need anymore. Weeks passed like that. Not fast, not slow, just steady. One evening, Lena knocked with a casserole dish in hand. Said her son. Wanted me to try her lasagna. Said it wasn't as good as mine, but it came from the right place. I took one bite and smiled. Told her it tasted like care. She exhaled like I'd handed her something sacred. And in a way, I had. It wasn't just about the food. It was about being seen, heard, held. Not with hands, but with effort. With intention. That was what had been missing all along. Not appreciation, but recognition. And now in this tiny cottage with a crooked porch and a dented stove, I was finally being recognized. Not for what I gave, but for who I was when I gave it. It was a Sunday morning when I saw him. I just finished watering the rosemary by the kitchen window, the sun barely warming the sill. The kettle hissed behind me, steam curling toward the ceiling, and I was reaching for my mug when something caught in the corner of my eye. A. Car. Silver. Familiar. Parked halfway down the drive. And then he stepped out. Christopher, older, of course. I could see it even from the window. The crease between his brows, the tension in the way he stood, looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just stopped shrinking for him. I didn't open the door. I let him stand there, hands in, his pockets glancing toward the house like he wasn't sure he was allowed to knock. After a few minutes, he did. 3 soft raps, not the kind that demand, the kind that ask. I opened the door. But not all the way. He tried to smile. Said my name like it was a question. I said hello. He asked if I had a minute. I didn't answer right away. Just studied him. He looked tired. But not the kind of tired that comes from work or children or sleepless nights. It was a soul tired. The kind that creeps in when you realize you've done something you can't undo. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We sat on the porch, him on the top step, me in the chair beside the planter. I didn't offer him tea. I didn't ask if he'd eaten. I just waited. He said he didn't know where to start. I said the beginning usually works. He laughed, small and bitter. Then rubbed his hands together like he was trying to keep them from shaking. He said Dana had left. I nodded, said it wasn't about me, but maybe it was. Maybe she didn't like the way I made him look at things. I said nothing. He said he hadn't. Wanted to sign the papers that it was all Dana's idea, that he'd been stupid, passive. He used that word, passive. I tilted my head, listening, not agreeing. He looked at me then, really looked, said he missed me. Said the house felt cold. I thought about the house. The fridge to clean, the counters to quiet. The air full of control and judgment and surface. I imagined him eating alone, cold takeout, empty plates. No leftovers worth keeping. He asked if I forgave him. Still, I said nothing, because forgiveness is not something you hand out like napkins. It's not polite. It's not a given. It's a door. And sometimes that door stays closed. He said he was sorry, and this time, I believed him. But belief isn't the same as return. I said softly, "You didn't forget me. You erased me." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. I said, "You took the stove and mocked the hands that fed you." He looked at his feet. I said, "I gave you everything. My time, my body, my care. And when you found someone shinier, someone with new words and smoother skin, you rewrote the story to make me small enough to step over." He whispered, "I didn't mean to." I said, "But you did." He started to cry, just barely. I let him, not out of cruelty, out of fairness. Because tears, like truths, need space. He asked if I'd come back. I looked at the porch railing. The tiny crack in the paint I'd been meaning to fix. I thought about the muffins in the kitchen, the neighbor's boy riding past with his shoelaces. Undone, the way Lena said my soup tasted like memory. I said no. He asked if he could come again, just to talk. I looked him in the eye. I said, "I'm not a ghost you get to visit when you feel lonely. I'm not the past. I'm the woman who walked out, stove and all, and built a better table." He nodded slowly, said he understood. I think he did. We sat there a few minutes longer. No more words. Then he stood, said goodbye. I said, "Take care." And I meant it. He walked to the car without looking back. I didn't watch him drive away. I went inside, poured my tea, sat at the kitchen table with the sun on my hands. The kettle had gone quiet, so the muffins were still warm. I took one and broke it open. The scent of cinnamon filled the room. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about what anyone else would think of it. It was mine, just mine. The morning came soft. The way some days arrive, not with purpose, but with invitation. Light spilled through the curtains like a whisper, and for once I didn't rush to fill the silence. I just sat at the edge of the bed, feet brushing the rug, hands resting in my lap like they were waiting for something to arrive. Or maybe to leave. There was nothing pressing that day. No phone calls, no dishes to scrub. Just the weightless, knowing that no one expected anything from me anymore. And that was the most peaceful kind of freedom. I walked to the kitchen, barefoot, the floor cool against my heels. The stove, my stove, stood quietly in the corner, exactly where it belonged. I hadn't cooked anything elaborate in a while. Not since Christopher's visit. That encounter had settled in my chest like a stone in a stream, unmoving, but no longer sharp. I wasn't angry anymore, simply done. There's a difference. I made tea, cinnamon this time. Not to remember anything just because I liked the way it smelled. I sat on the porch with the mug cradled in both hands and looked out at the rose bush. A single bloom had opened overnight, delicate and bright. Like it had waited until I was ready to notice. The past had stopped knocking. The calls had slowed, then stopped. Even Dana, always so persistent, had gone quiet. No more emails. No more apologies that felt more like demands. It's just stillness. And in that stillness, I found room to breathe. I took out my notebook later that afternoon, the one I'd carried since the motel. I flipped through its pages, each one thick with memory. Some joyful, some bitter, all honest toward the end. I found a page I'd left blank weeks ago. I hadn't known then why I skipped it. Now I did. I picked up my pen and wrote, "I am not what they discarded. I am what I kept, what I chose, what I refused to let be renamed." I closed the notebook. There was one more thing I had to do. I went to the hall closet and pulled down the shoebox I'd packed quietly the day I left. Inside were photos, letters, small tokens from a life that no longer felt like mine. I sifted through them slowly. The image of Dana at the old dining table. Christopher as a teenager, arms crossed in defiance. Birthday cards signed with love that I now understood came with a price. I didn't rip them, didn't burn them, just held each one, acknowledged its weight, and placed it into a canvas bag. I walked to the edge of town, to the small cove behind the library. There was a spot there I'd visited once with Sarah, quiet, out of the way. The wind carried salt and softness in equal parts. A few seagulls watched from the rocks, disinterested. I sat on the low stone wall, pulled out the bag, and removed one photo, the oldest. Christopher as a toddler, his hands sticky with jam, face wide with joy. I pressed the corner between my fingers for a long time. Then I let it go. The wind didn't fight me, just lifted it gently from my palm and carried it into the water. I let go of the rest, one by one, a slow surrender, not to loss, but to space. To the idea that I didn't need to carry every version of myself to be whole. When the bag was empty, I sat still for a long while. The water moved without urgency, like it understood. I thought about all the meals I'd made in silence. All the times my presence had been invisible, unless something was missing, a spoon, a napkin, a clean dish. I thought about the way Dana laughed when I offered seconds, as if kindness was a weakness. And then I thought of Lena, of her boy waving from his bicycle, of muffins cooling on the sill, of the honey cellar at the market and the fig jam still half full in my fridge. This was not a new life. It was the same life, reclaimed. I stood up, brushed the sand from my hands, and walked home with the empty bag swinging softly by my side. That evening, I lit a candle on the stove, not for ceremony, not for prayer, just because I liked the way it flickered in the dark. I sat at the kitchen table with a slice of fresh cornbread and watched the light move across the wall. No music, no voices, just the quiet hum of a woman at peace. And as I took my last bite, I whispered it aloud, not to anyone else, but to myself. This time I decide who gets to call me anything else.